Hi everyone, welcome back to Extra Credit, and this is our 16th episode on ancient Greece. So last time we saw how thanks to the brilliance and bravery of Themistocles and the Athenians, the Greeks once again fought their way to a miraculous underdog victory at the crucial sea battle of Salamis. As for the defeated King Xerxes, with his dreams of world domination now in shambles, his next move was worthy of a true politician. He declared victory and packed his bags for home. Now that might sound a little bit dishonest, but remember, in Xerxes' mind, goal number one had always been to take revenge for the Battle of Marathon by burning Athens to the ground. And with that box technically checked off now, the fact that the Greeks themselves weren't exactly conquered yet was an inconvenient detail that he could afford to look at later. So for now, it was mission accomplished. Trust me, if you're like over 40 and are reasonably well acquainted with US foreign policy, this picture is really, really funny. So despite having whooped the Persians soundly on water, the Greeks still had to deal with the terrifying reality of the enormous Persian land army camped out in northern Greece. And with the great king himself now hightailing it for home, the man in charge of that army was none other than the king's favorite cousin, Mardonius. You'll remember Mardonius from episode 10 as the guy who was like, "Yeah, Xerxes, you should totally invade Greece. What could possibly go wrong?" Yeah, he had a lot of kissing up to do. And according to Herodotus, that kissing up sounded something like this. "Master, do not be upset or imagine that what has happened at Salamis is somehow a great calamity. In the final reckoning, this is a contest that will be decided not by planks of wood, but by men and horses. If you are resolved, then certainly head off home. It will then be my responsibility to bring Greece to slavery for you." Translation: I got this. So in plain English, what Mardonius was offering here was to personally take control of the king's army and to crush the Greeks in battle on land once and for all. And on paper, it was a pretty solid idea. Not only had Xerxes left Mardonius about 100,000 guys to get the job done, but crucially that number included cavalry, meaning horseback-mounted warriors who were famous for wreaking havoc on hoplite armies. By comparison, the most the Greeks could put on the field was somewhere around 38,000, meaning that despite the fact that this was easily the biggest hoplite army ever assembled in one place, the Greeks were still outnumbered by 2 to 1. Which, I mean, I know we know where this is going by now, but at least pretend you're in suspense. Now, with the Athenians having saved the day by sea at Salamis, it was time again for their partners from the Peloponnese to step up and take the lead on land. Meaning that in the battle to come, aka the last great battle of the Persian Wars, the vanguard of the Greek army would be made not of a mere 300, but 5,000 Spartan warriors. Their commander was a general named Pausanias, whose job in the autumn of 479 BC was nothing less than to end the Persian threat to Greece once and for all. And I mean, like, actually once and for all. This isn't the MCU, for goodness sake. The spot where Pausanias hoped to finish off the Persians for good was on the slopes of a mountain 7 miles east of a tiny Greek city-state called Plataea. You'll remember from episodes 8 and 9, of course, that the people of Plataea were the only Greeks to have stood beside their Athenian brethren at the now legendary Battle of Marathon that had started this whole kerfuffle 10 years earlier. But history aside, both the Greeks and Persians had reasons in the present day for choosing Plataea as the place for their final showdown. The Persians liked it for its vast, flat fields that gave all the advantage to their fearsome cavalry, whereas the outnumbered Greeks liked it because of the nearby foothills where they could take shelter from said cavalry. Which meant that once both sides had arrived and dug into their positions, the stage was now set for the most epic staring contest of all time. But really, the Battle of Plataea does tend to get the short end of the stick in the history books, not because it's less important, but it's just a bit less cinematic than what we've seen so far. Unlike the big three of Marathon, Thermopylae, and Salamis, which are pretty straightforward as battles go, the Battle of Plataea was pretty much a mess from start to finish. And that's like before the blood and guts. From the get-go, the main goal of the Persian commander Mardonius was to lure the Greeks down onto the open fields where they'd be sitting ducks for his cavalry. But with a big spring of fresh water right next to the Spartan camp, plus all the food they could eat, the Spartan commander Pausanias had no reason to take that bait. So to stir things up a little bit, the Persian commander Mardonius made the first move by sending out a raiding party to poke at the Greeks' defenses. Which wasn't a bad idea in and of itself, but it kind of fell apart when the Persian in charge of the raiding party got himself killed because the flashy purple and gold outfit he was wearing drew a little bit too much attention. Now that's what you call a fashion disaster. So after 7 long days of waiting for the Greeks to come out and play, Mardonius decided that it was time for him to play dirty. In back-to-back strikes, he first ransacked a supply caravan carrying food to the Greeks, and then really turned up the heat by destroying the Spartans' water supply. Which meant that the Greeks now faced the lovely options of A. Stay put and have fun with no food and water, or B. Retreat to a new camp across open ground and have fun with the Persian horsemen. So the Greeks went ahead and chose option C, which was even more fun, even if it was equally suicidal. Instead of retreating by day, where they'd be easy pickings for the Persian cavalry, Pausanias decided to lead a risky nighttime retreat, hoping to find a new campsite under cover of darkness. But as tends to happen when 40,000 guys who are all too cool to ask for directions try to find their way to the same meeting place through unfamiliar territory in pitch black, without Siri, it was kind of a gong show. Thus, when the sun rose the next day, instead of seeing the Greeks dug into their new campsite a couple of miles away, the gleefully disbelieving Persians instead saw the Greek army scattered here and there in disordered clumps across the landscape for miles around. Knowing it was now or never, Mardonius jumped at the chance to strike his bewildered foes before they could regroup and get their bearings. Leaping onto his white war horse, the Persian general summoned his toughest troops and shot straight for Pausanias' isolated battalion. A last-minute plea to the Athenians to send reinforcements went nowhere, as the Athenians themselves were already too busy fighting for their own lives a couple of kilometers away. So with just one other allied company from the city-state of Tegea standing alongside them, Pausanias and the Spartans turned to face the tidal wave of Persia one last time. In this final contest, Mardonius threw everything he had at the Greeks, with his horseback-mounted archers burying them under an endless hail of arrows. Holding their ground as only Spartans could do, the hoplites simply gritted their teeth and waited with iron discipline. But when the moment for counterattack finally did come, the Spartans once again seized the opportunity to clinch their reputations as living legends. Advancing slowly but surely in an unbroken line, the Spartans hammered away at the Persian shield wall, while Mardonius' men did all they could to grab the Spartans' spears and break them in two. According to Herodotus, in terms of spirit and strength, the Persians were in no way inferior to the Greeks, but they lacked protective armor and the training that would have made them a match for their Spartan opponents. Nonetheless, as long as Mardonius remained alive, the Persians held their ground, and indeed inflicted heavy casualties on the Spartans. But after what must have felt like an eternity, the decisive moment finally came when Mardonius, perched up on his high horse, took a stone to the skull and came crashing to the ground. With their commander gone, the tide finally turned, and the battle became a bloodbath, with many of the surviving Persians fleeing to a nearby wooden fort where they were surrounded and massacred by the avenging Greeks. And just like that, it was finished. Herodotus calls the Battle of Plataea the most glorious victory of any known to us, because whatever it may have lacked in cinematic quality, its impact was undeniable. Not only did it finally provide vengeance for Leonidas and the 300 Spartans who had given their lives at Thermopylae, but after 10 years, 5 battles, 2 invasions, and 1 epic clash of civilizations, the Persian Wars were over. As the exhausted Greeks picked their way across the bloody battlefield, they came across Xerxes' own personal tent, which he had left behind for Mardonius to make use of. Awestruck by the wealth and luxury on display all around him, the Spartan general Pausanias could only scratch his head and wonder why a king who already had everything could possibly have wanted to invade his own poor country in the first place. But really, it was for the food. Right, Pausanias? That's a little Little inside joke between me and Pausanias. Hey everyone, thank you so much for watching Extra Credit. As always, we are almost done this series on the Persian Wars with just one episode remaining.
This week's pop quiz is who commanded the Persian forces at the Battle of Plataea? Make sure to drop off your answer in room 215.
As always, work hard, read books, play outside, and we'll see you next time.